thank you that you are here, and thank you the Academie der Künste for this possibility I have to speak, for this open space. And I will tell you a couple of ideas that maybe are also interesting for you as also as musician and as artist. But none of these ideas comes from me. It comes from the work of a lot of people that are doing in the next decade. So actually I owe a great deal to my father, this ornithologist, and he bring me along on countless excursion when I was a child. I was not always like enthusiastic of it, but I learned something. And also I owe a great deal on the pioneering work of Ökoakustik that has been made is a very new discipline, and a lot of people and a lot of researchers all around the world are expanding this exciting field. And also for this idea I owe a lot to the colonial ecology of Malcolm Ferdinand, and to the very horizontal and inclusive approach on art of artists Marina Naprushkina and the group, the collective working with there. And I'm also a part of this group. That this group is gathering this initiative that is called Nakbashat Moabit, that was founded in 2013. And the idea, during the first refugee crisis, and the idea was to create a social and artistic platform for exchange, mutual learning, and engagement, and for the neighborhood from all over the world. And in this context, we were discussing how we can find a way to tell this climate crisis, biodiversity, ecosystem complexity to urban raised children, and to make an example, there is this family that are from Chechnya with 7 children. For example, they live in a Plattenbau, in a very space, and there are people that don't really have the children that don't really have access to a lot of cultural offer or events that can bring them nearby some kind of sensibilities. And we would like to add to find the system was very cheap, and that was not really, that didn't require to build an immersive ecoacoustic theater or to bring 80 tons of Arctic ice to Europe or something to make this meaningful experience, at least at best without any technology help at all. And so we started this kind of low-cost experiment that still is ongoing. It takes a little bit in Moabit, in the Nakbashat, and a little bit in Tegelsee, because we are also active there at Strandbad, Tegelsee. And this project has always has some outcomes, but we are still doing it, and has involved many people. And if you scan this code there, if you are interested, I put there is more information and links and about that and about what we are doing, and also a reference list of stuff. And so what I would like to make today is to tell about some ideas that came up during this journey, and some discovery also unexpected for me too. And more than talk about the community realization is a little bit the core ideas and the fil rouge that connects them, and a little bit also of the philosophy at the ground of this approach. Maybe I should start with clarifying 2 words. I think they're important, and the first is the word Anthropocene, that we have. The word is becoming mainstream, but it's kind of misleading, and probably we should even use it because it perpetuates this abstract gaze, like that impedes to recognize that we in the ecological crisis is neither given or self-evident. It's like this kind of discriminatory universalism, this humanity as such, as the agent of history, is indeed like at the basis of environmentalist as a white utopia, you can call it, and is a thing that erased in block all this racial, colonial, gender, and class oppression, exploitation, and this relationship of power and violence that are the basis of the crisis. And on the other side, on the other side of the coin, we have these more or less rich white guys that telling us how to save the world, and building a sustainable megacity in the Arabian desert, I guess, or things like this, or crypto-based carbon compensation system. There is also this kind of things. There has been other proposal for to use other definition, like Donna Haraway have suggested naming the epoch the Capitalocene, but a word I like more is Plantationocene, because it calls attention to the role that plantation agriculture, has played in colonial context and the consolidation of capital and rising of industrialization. And colonialism indeed is a very important concept, and I think we cannot really think ecology without colonialism or separate them. And in fact, in this asymmetrical relationship of colonialism, there is also this divide between colonizer and colonized, or oppressor and oppressed. While the oppressor are civilized, progressive, and advanced, the oppressed, they don't have neither a proper culture or either a nature, and are compared to animals. And because if you need to dominate them, you have to make it this clear distinct. And this happens not only between humans, but also between a big part of humanity and non-humans. And it's the same relationship. And probably this is the why, because we are so alienated from we Western, so I as a Western person, I feel so alienated from the ecosystem. And the other word I would like to talk about is music, and that's a very basic concept. And there is this, in our tradition, there is this definition from Edgar Varese that says music is organized sound, and it sounds like a very broad definition. It's indeed not so wide. If you can imagine that these things that we call music, this word, is not even present in a lot of other languages, so it's not a universal concept. For example, it's interesting, there is this, the Mi'kmaq people of Newfoundland, they don't use at all the words music, but rather an expression that literally means it sounds good. So it's something that has to do with the quality and experience than the way a particular thing is produced, or organized. And also, there are many examples. If you just take a book of ethnomusicology, there is community living in New Guinea and the Amazon rainforest. They often conceptualize humans and non-human sounds in the same terms, and the Nestlik Inuit consider songs just as one type of natural sound. And I think there's even this music concept in the Euro-Western space has changed in the last centuries, it became wider. I think it's strongly tied to this idea of individual creation, and of a mostly two-dimensional, univocal, asymmetric, and mostly non-interactive sonic space, and of course to capitalism. And if you are in a context of dominant global culture, like what happens is that what does not fit with this parameter is either like marginalized or forcibly assimilated, trivialized, commercialized, put in a museum, or just not considered simply. And actually the easiest way, we have a lot of time to have immediate access of a lot of things, is as tourists. So we are tourists like to picturesque places, we are tourists to foreign culture, exotic custom, and we are also tourists to ethnic music, say, and also even I think we are tourists of the music of our past in some way, and but also definitely we are tourists for to the soundscape of a forest, and tourism is kind of tight related to colonialism, I think, and in any case they presuppose this like division, like we mentioned earlier, and also a certain like blissful ignorance of some degrees. But I think, as you can imagine, not every human on Earth has experienced like this division, this rift. Like some did actually not, and but I do. Maybe perhaps most of those present here also do. But I think there should be like a better way to listen and to understand. And actually, I have just only one listening thing that it's as a very big contrast for the tropical forest we listened yesterday. This is a record I made with my phone in the cell phone in the Black Forest in Germany, and it's not here, but can I try to play it, but probably I cannot. Yeah, it's. I find it sounds a bit spooky, because actually there's nothing to hear. It's a dying forest. There's a thing that's happening all across Europe. Like those pine, we plant a lot of pine trees because they grow very fast, and now all these pine trees are dying because they have a lot of stress because of climate change, and they cannot cope with this parasite. I know that only the German in the Borkenkäfer, like, and a lot of forests all across Europe are dying. The sounds like this, like the sounds are pretty terrible, and no other species would like to have it like this kind of sounding environment. Also from very a very superficial listening, it's like a soundscape give us like a little bit like some information about the earth of an environment. But actually, I think that we do not consider when we hear to a soundscape is actually soundscape is not an acoustic context common to all species, but it's actually an acoustic context that's unique to each species on Earth. And because of this species-specific perception, there are as many soundscapes as there are species, and they possess auditory abilities, and maybe as many soundscapes as individuals. And what we hear when we go in a forest is just our like sound bubble, like it's between like 20 hertz, 20,000 hertz range. And in ecoacoustic, what we cannot hear is called the latent soundscape. It is there, but we cannot hear it. A curious thing, an interesting thing, I think there is like with these field recordings, also the one we listened yesterday, this tropical field recording, is that in this case, also the latent soundscape is not there. Like it's like I think that another species that has another hearing range that could like enter the room, and they could they won't be able to make sense of what they are hearing because it's actually a fake. It's just a kind of a abstraction. And curiously, what the guarantees of authenticity is a thing that we cannot even listen. And so, probably like sound recording, like field recording, could be a problematic thing. Yeah, because like also from a pure acoustically perspective, actually, it's what you cannot hear as human, but it's not there. There's a guarantee of authenticity of what you're hearing. Like, it's like, of course, we cannot hear, but also it's not there. In the recording, because the recording cut out like everything else. Yeah. Yeah, of soundscape. Yeah. And so it's like, I find like, that's not an idea, that's really our, of course, our recording, field recording are kind of biased, like, somehow. And there are a lot of other things we cannot hear in the environment. We maybe could hear, like, with technology, we could like try to hear like some of them. The question is if we should actually, but it's an open question. For example, another thing that makes our perception very, very different is like, for example, we process sounds in bytes about 1/20th of a second long, and birds discriminate up to 1/200th of a second. This means that when we hear only one note, a lot of birds hear 10 notes. And it's like, this is the Eurasian wren, and at some point, yes, like in his song, there's a very high-pitched like trill, like very little, like, and probably another Eurasian wren actually doesn't hear like a trill at all, but a much complex structure. Of the things also we cannot perceive, and there is like I think that it's called like in Ökoakustik it's called the vibroscape, and you can understand what it is actually is vibration that propagate on solids and not on air. And probably in ecosystem for a lot of organisms there is not such like in our experience we divide like very, very, very clearly between sounds and vibration. Probably does not happen like so clearly for a lot of organisms. And the information that comes from vibration surface like trees or the ground, like complement themselves with the information they got from the air, and they can and actually we should not be surprised that actually the vibroscape is much more populated actually than the soundscape. So it's happening much more, and there's like a vibrational scape than in the acoustic space on top of it. And a last thing that we can barely perceive, but I think it's interesting, is a thing that is called the odorscape, and I don't know, like scentscape would have sounded better probably, but it's like chemical messages, and it's very interesting from a timing point of view because these messages that are like delivered through chemicals remains in the landscape very long. And so they build a kind of like memory in the landscape that stays for a long time, and so that makes that probably the perception of the present for animals that can read these chemical messages, like you can imagine dogs are like different from us. You can imagine a dog like can feel the presence can feel past present much more clearly because they are kind of like remains, like written in the landscape for a long time. Yeah, and so it would also be nice if we could read like this memory, but we can't. And keeping to speaking of timing, I think it's also like very interesting for a musician. And timing is a very huge topic in ecosystem. It's much more complex than the timing we are used to think about. I start with the first example that is like a very easy example of synchronicity. Like a cricket chorus, all these insects they are in synchronous. They have to sing together. It's beautiful, but this erects like an acoustic protective texture. So for as long as they sing in synchronous and perfectly together, the predator cannot pick up like the singular. Of course, if there is a sound interference, then upset the synchronicity. Once the single animals try to reestablish it, then they have there is like a big danger that they are like they sound individual and they can be like located. Like for just a very like easy example of synchronicity. If you think like in a more global way, and actually we make a little bit an abstraction, we can say that there are there is in an ecosystem like 3 levels across a landscape, so to say 3 levels of timing probably, like, but it's an abstraction. It's useful to make an idea. Like there is like a first level that is like has to do with the biological timing of the individual. It depends from like the morphology, like the physiology of an individual. Then there's a second timing level that has to do like with the interaction that each individuals have with the same species, but also with other species. And then there is this third level time that has to do like with these bigger cycles or bigger phases, disturbances like day-night, like season where there are seasons, and the latitude where there are seasons, but also like things like fires, like in an untouched environment. Fires happen, but they happen like with a very precise timing. Like they happen only after a long period without them, and when there is enough biomass to cause the forest to burn, or for example, there are all these other like crazy timing of the cicada popping out like every 7 or 13 years, like perfectly like this, and making a lot of sounds. And it's interesting because it means that every level of organization, like from the cell to the entire biomes, operate actually at different time resolution. And the thing is how if your life depends so much from the interaction between other species and with the other part of the environment, then you have to have an internal timing or you have to create a time window that is inclusive and flexible enough to come along with all these other like timing structure. It's not like we have like this very precise timing, but imagine if we have to adjust our timing to the timing of other species. If we have to leave our time like adjusting our rhythm to not only of the time of other species, but also to these like bigger cycles. And I think we should need to have like a much like wider and fluid and inclusive feeling of the time. And if you have like a little bit, if you have a little bit a closer look to this timing structure, it's very fascinating. In ecoacoustic, there is this thing this called acoustic niche hypothesis. Maybe somebody already heard about this. Like very very briefly, it means that an ecosystem evolved in order to minimize overlap between individuals, and also overlap and interference between a calling individual that happens through selection on signal structure, or to the sender ability to adjust the timing of the signal. And this is like the interesting point. If we imagine, you can imagine. Thank you.
I don't want to interrupt, but
No, it's okay.
We are all dying.
Yeah. Don't die. Don't die. Don't die, please.
Can't say that to the birds.
Okay, like, so imagine you have in a tropical forest, like the weather is almost the same, like, and in a spot of in a tropical spot, like in a protected area in Costa Rica, there are like more than 400 like alien species like checklisted, and if you go in a point in the forest, you can, if you're good, you can recognize up to 40 of them singing at the same time. And now imagine if we are like one of them. Like imagine we are like this a rufous-breasted wren. That's this one. Yeah. And imagine like rufous-breasted wren, because imagine in a very standard occasion that is dating. Happens a lot of time. So imagine you have met somebody the day before and you want to meet them again. And for a lot of birds in the tropical forest, a good way is to do duet. Like actually, duet is in bird singing is a huge theme, and also all about bird calling and singing is a very complex argument. But there are some species that does like very timed duet, and for many reasons it's not still clear why. And we can imagine that sometimes duet are used to locate each other. So you start singing first, so they listen, they answer, so you can locate it a little bit, you call back, and after a while you find each other. And the problem is that at the same moment there is other 16 species that sings in the same frequency range, and that can cause a lot of like comprehension problems because overlapping and frequency interferences. And the mode, I try to be louder than everyone else, doesn't work, and we create like a mess if everybody would like try to do that. So the thing that's happening that you have to listen to every other individuals, and in order to time you in the right moment, and in order to time you also with the other individual you are trying to catch up. And so I don't know if you imagine like a human situation, it's like you have to find a person in a big square where there is a lot of people, and you are at two sides of the square, and you have only auditory cues, because also in a tropical forest visual cues doesn't work too much because it's very like dense. And so you have to listen, but you cannot be loud, because otherwise it's everybody who start to be loud, will be a mess. So you have to listen to find your spot, and the other is also to find the spot, and there's like, and at the end, probably, like, if everybody knows the rules, how it works, like, works like magic, and yeah, it's being used the ecosystem, and not enough. Since you have like to try to survive till the end of the day, you have also to be very attentive on the background, to catch alarm from other species that could signal predator presence. So actually, if you want, like, I found it like this a very kind of mind-blowing example of deep listening. And in fact, if you want to use like the terminology of Pauline Oliveros, we can say there is this complex, very complex, multi-dimensional focal attention on the foreground, and there is always present this global attention on the background. And you should also not forget that you are not just listening, you are also producing sound, you are also singing. So that's required really like complexity that I think we are so used to have like this dyadic relationship, like this sender receiver, and so that I think like I find this complexity quite mind-blowing. And in ecosystem there is like always this complex network of signals to receivers, and this finally creates these acoustic communities we were talking. That is like this fascinating concept. And acoustic communities has been also defined like comprehending human. For example, Barry Truax defined like any soundscape in which acoustic information plays a pervasive role in the lives of the inhabitants. So in short, is any system within which acoustic information is exchanged. And this is an okay definition, but I also have the feeling that most of our human acoustic communities require much less listening, and they are not interspecies at all. So we can say that an acoustic community is actually an aggregation of individuals from different species that produce sounds and is based on mutual listening. Like has been described a lot of this acoustic community form. They are not like a fixed idea. They form like they are like there are a lot of them. They are a kind of more fluid concept. They form on a daily scale. There are daylit and crepuscular communities, some bird insect, nocturnal communities. Some communities form only when the temperature is for example cicadas sings together only when the ambient temperature is at its maximum, and there is fish choruses at night, like the humpback whale that somebody like also they have this acoustic community at night, and there is also at some latitudes there is season communities, at temperate latitudes that is acoustic community of birds have a peak also in autumn during migration. And funny, there is also this very like opportunistic acoustic community that sometimes form. This is funny, and there is because some couple of fun facts. There is in nature this eavesdropping phenomenon that in German we would say mithören. There is several species that use the sound producers of other species like to do stuff, and for example this. Northern leopard frog, it has been shown to help migratory birds to orient, because like without knowing probably, but actually it looks like the birds can estimate their altitude based on the assumption that the altitude function as a sort of low pass filter. And they are very, very noisy, and the birds like flying on this humid area, like in North America, where the frogs sings, can guess their altitude by this low pass filter effect. Or also crickets, cricket chirping. Like if you count how many cricket chirpings in 15 seconds and add 37. You can have a very good approximation of the temperature in Fahrenheit, because the frequency of chirping is very, very connected to temperature rising. And so I will be surprised if no other like inhabitants of the ecosystem use this information. That's super precise.
Can you say it again?
That if the chirping every 15 seconds and then you add 37, you have the temperature in Fahrenheit, not in Celsius. Also, there is like this other thing that's also quite funny. Like, actually, there is this red-breasted nuthatches that has learned and that encode information very precise regarding the size and the risk of predator in the alarm calls, and other birds learn like they learn these foreign languages, and or there is not a one that's much even funnier. that is about like teats that are like this is a blue teat. There is some hierarchies in their groups, but the subordinate teats are like they found like this technique to deceive like the dominant one. They make like an alarm call and wait that the other like escape, and then they go there to eat their food. And so and a very good concept to understand how this acoustic community works is also an abstract concept. You have to take it how it is, like it's a scientific tool. But for me, like as a Western, it helps me a lot to understand why we are so disconnected and alienated to the ecosystem. And this abstract tool is called eco-field model. And there is, like it says, that there is the entity, there's the field, and it's like, and the field connects internal needs of an organism with the resources necessary to satisfy such needs. And in order to do that, the individual create a spatial configuration of the object perceived like in a current way. Like we can say the species assigned a meaning to a specific spatial arrangement associated with the resources they need to have. And this is a very important point because it's similar to the idea of Umwelt, but Umwelt is a subjective space for an individual, but this is not only the subjective space, it's the meaningful space, the semiotic space that is connected to need and the need to get resources in the environment. And so in order to get some resources, you shape the environment in a certain way. So it's not like the soundscape. So if you think the soundscape has evolved in a forest, like in order to be like very organized, is actually, I think the wrong vision is actually what's going on is less and more. There is individual, there are needs. In order to satisfy their needs, they need resources. In order to find these resources, they need to connect in communities. And that's the thing. Like we don't need to be in the environment to satisfy our needs. Like because our need, like we satisfy our needs, we take resources in this like very come, destroy, take, or like in a colonialist way. So we don't need anymore to be connected with the resources and the environment, and we don't need anymore like to be inside this kind of space. And the only remaining like ecofield, the only remaining of a possible ecofield, like meaningful way to organize the space in an environment is like, is the touristic one. Like, and I think that's because there is a lot of time of misunderstanding. It's not that we don't understand the environment because we are like we are human and we are animals, or like, but because like we are out of the game, like, but not because we are other things. We are the same things. We belong in this, but we just like the way we reach our resources it's so much other that of course we are out of the game, and that's why there is like this incomprehension. And like for example, there was like this fact that happened like probably like some months ago in Italy in the mountain, like a bear killed a guy was jogging in the forest, and it's a tragedy of course, but imagine how can a bear make some sense of this guy jogging in the forest? Like it's of course it's like a totally for the bear. What should like this is a action out of every like possibility that has the bear to make sense of the environment that is connected to his their way to find these resources. It's like that's why I think that's why there is this like terrible incomprehension, and we are so alienated because we are not like more, so we taking resources from it, and so we don't need more to make acoustic community with other spaces like all the other spaces does all the time. But we don't need them because we have like an industrial system, and so who cares? Yeah.
I think a good example is farmers in, I think it's in the Yucatan. They know a lot about the weather patterns that are driven by watching birds and other animals. And so they can, they know this weather is coming because they are listening to the birds or watching the birds.
Yeah.
They need to know that because they work with.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and so at the end, there's like a little bit like an answer to the question we were doing at the beginning. How we can like bring like this urban side a little bit like nearby, like a world that we don't have nothing to do with that, only just walking in the forest or out. And I think there is a lot of way, but I think like telling stories and use the imagination is a very good way. So you don't even need to have a scientific comprehension of a lot of things. And I want like to finish with an example. And this example is I would like to read a passage from an Italian text of the beginning of the 20th century that talk about how people in rural communities in the Alps region were describing the singing of the finch, that is this one. That's very common bird, and this is, I think, a very good example how imagination can be like a way and storytelling a way to approach the environment. And we can actually these mountain communities in the Alps has been like isolated for centuries, at least until the building of modern infrastructure and mass tourism. They were like totally like really at the border of Western civilization. And this text exactly talks about how people there, like living there, were making sense of this bird singing. There's a lot of Italian terms, but they don't really have proper meaning. They were used mostly for the resemblance, for the onomatopoeic resemblance to the bird. So One verse of the finch, the most common, we call Francesco mio, because the bird terminates, it seems, saying those two words quickly but clearly. Another we call Barbazio, another Cescrio. To a certain musician, we give the title of ribaltone, from the jolting modulation of the song, from the overturning, ribaltare of the notes. To another, of striscione, from the smearing, strisciare of the beats. To another, of Monte Giove. To another, of Boschereccio, which is a shorter, scrambled Francesco mio. Some are in their singing so amusing, not much for the harmony, as for the sonorous voice. They are also different in their singing, for some make a single cantata, and in finishing some do the sfrin, some the nicchio, others double, triple the cantata with much taste, others keep it long and with so much voice that is wonder regarding their littleness. And how many varieties in the spring! There is, they say, the buccio, the gruccio, the griccio, the boccio, the gruspaccio, the totozio, the dorocheo, the giorgiobio, the cibeo, and down to 26 different endings. These are curious but apt names to determine the variety of the song, and it is curious that they always keep the same place, those who sing the same finale, so that in the Pinè Valley, boccio abound, in Salorno, gruspaccio, in Faedo, another place, the gerlo, and others in other places. Some finches make the finals on the dot, according to the set manner of singing, but they conclude with a firm vibrato point, a cheat, and are called beating finches. These are found in Pinet, in the valleys of the Avisio. But in vain would they be sought in the Adige Valley. I remember hearing only one of these in Campo Trentino. It was heard and admired as an event. And what is curious is that in the places I've mentioned, you find a little valley and the finches will have the chit ending. You pass into another, even at a small distance, you no longer find one. And I find kind of fascinating how the people when they are talking about only one species, but they are almost individually knowing each bird by their way of seeing, almost individually naming this every kind of different endings, and they were so good in listening to them. They were they could give name for more than 26 different endings for a single species. And this, I think, a good example, a possibility, but then of course that requires a lot of care and a lot of vicinity and a lot of respect, but doesn't require much. It's very cheap, doesn't require a lot of technology and a lot of science. Just requires imagination. Thank you. You can take it with your.
Any questions?
Yeah, one question. Yeah. I don't know what time.
The text, did you just read or did you find it?
It's an old book from about tradition views in Trentino, in north of Italy, and it's a book written at the beginning of the 20th century. I can give it
Oh. Is it secret?
No, it's not a secret. It's more about hunting and this kind of tradition, and it's called. I have to find it. So.
Yeah.
I can.
No worries.
Well, thanks for the presentation. This last text was pretty amazing, I have to say. But you also told us about Gemeinschaften.
Yeah.
I was curious to hear a bit more about that. Basically, what did you learn from the participant there yourself?
Yeah.
Engaging with some of these things.
We did a couple of experiments. Once were and both with children. The first one was very difficult because it was only Ukrainian children and the communication was quite hard. So, but the second one we had more people were interpreting a lot, and it was much better. And I think we did there on Strand by Tegelsee. That is a beautiful place. Maybe have you been there? And there is a little bit of forest nearby, and we start try to tell some stories of some very simple processes, and then to listen a little bit also their experience. And for example, we started to do to speak a little bit about this. There is this Lombard effect. That is, say that a lot of birds in urban environment, as they have to sing much louder than birds in a wide environment. And when we do this, we also have some recording, but it was interesting to try to there was the kids were very young, from 6 to maybe 8, 9, but it was very incredible enthusiastic to know that this pigeon actually, if you heard it in Berlin, in the city, sounds different that if you heard it here in the forest, and to get these differences. And it was example.
Just a quick question. Do you know of any like educational strategies or attempts to like practice imagining animal life or bird life from the first person perspective? Because the examples you gave were very intriguing, but they all also were obviously mostly from the outside, from a human perspective. I'm wondering, are there like educational tools or attempts to kind of like develop that kind of
a kind of like feeling, like
yeah, what's it like to be an octopus or what's it like? I'm wondering what, because you mentioned bottom school and umwelts and this. I'm wondering, is
probably there are. Probably there are, but I don't know them.
Yeah. It seems to be a potential.
Could be.
Area.
Yeah. I think the most is like, I think it's mostly a process that's a little bit slow because it's not like that you have an experience that you understand and you're in. Like, that's why it takes care. It takes to tell stories and then the kids also they go home. Then they make a drawing of this and that, and then they to develop like slowly like a connection that this takes some time and a community behind that.
Yeah, this is the point. It's a difficult thing to begin to develop.
Yes, I think it's not enough like one experience, one thing, like and one after one. It's like more. That's why you do need like community and an engagement that lasts in the time. You need to go there. And because also this connection are also built like not once, but yeah, of course you have to get to know. Otherwise, you are tourist and you are outside.
I think there are some pedagogic concepts. Like wilderness pedagogy, it's called in German Wildnispädagogik, and there you work like over longer time, sometimes weeks, also with children, but not only with children, and you learn by observing your surroundings and listening about So there are some pedagogic schools that work with that.
Okay. I think it's good that we come to an end now to have like a little break until the next session starts. To get over there.